Welcome down to my 9-foot homemade oak bar. Pour yourself a cold one. You are listening to Bucks in the Basement. My name's Chris, and Craig here is the biggest Pirates fan you'll ever meet. Let's talk Pirates baseball now. Welcome to Bucks in the Basement.
Now I see the changes in this town. They change, they say one thing, but then the next day it's different. They change, but they don't know what they want. All they do is change. Going left, going right, travel day, travel night. That's where we'll go. No excuses, no goodbyes, no one cries, no one lies. We'll never know.
Pirates have fallen off a cliff, off a plank, anything that you want to use. Pirates fans are frustrated, calling for the heads of anyone that they can. Not myself here just yet, but I looked back here the last time that we had this guest on. The Pirates were 44-47, now sitting at 56 and 64 after a 10-game losing streak. That could move further than that because the competition is not getting any easier with Seattle coming into town. Bringing back John Rock Wehner, definitely my favorite guest that I have on here. No offense to any other guest. It's just because I was a Pirates fan way back in the day, so I've been through a lot. John's been through a lot as a player and a broadcaster. John, how you doing today, sir?
I'm doing good. Wish we had this conversation on better terms, but obviously things have gone south for the squad, and it doesn't look good. A lot of bad things have happened the last couple weeks.
Yeah, I mean, there's when one thing is working, I know that a lot of people were talking about, before the All-Star break, if we could just get the hitting going, the pitching would be able to carry it through. We have games where the team, has been putting up runs, blown leads, bad starts, hitting disappears at times again, and really is not firing on any cylinders or any cylinder that you can count on at this point in time. So, John, this is it's a pretty blanket question. And I don't know if there's a great answer to this, but is there any place to point the blame, or does the blame kind of, if you try to point, one finger at somebody, there's, 4 fingers pointing back or 3 fingers pointing back? Is that the case where it's just like you can't really point in one direction because there's so much going wrong?
Well, yeah, you could be pretty broad about the blame, and you could trickle it all the way down. You could sit there and talk about, first and foremost, the economics of baseball and how handicapped you are as a small market club. So you could start at the very top. When you have the Dodgers and the Padres and the Mets and the Yankees, and, so many other teams with so many more resources that they can go and throw money at any problem they have, and not only can they throw money at it, they still get the draft, and they still get to sign Latin American players, international signings, and they can still throw money at a lot of different things, and if they make mistakes, or if guys have injuries, or if guys underperform, they're going to have a little more depth. And so I think, you look at that first, I think, because when you have a third of the payroll of some of these teams in Major League Baseball, you're up against it. And so I guess the next level would be, all right, now we're in year 5 of a plan where, you got high draft picks, you spend money in international market, you make some trades, and so you would think by year 5, you have a significant amount of talent to where you can compete, you hope, if you do things right. And so obviously through the first half of the season, we recognize that we have a pretty good pitching staff, and what we thought was a really good bullpen. And we've had some depth even on the starting side, maybe not so much on the bullpen side because of injury. I think a lot of it has to do with injury. We've lost a couple good bullpen arms over the course of this year, and I think about Barucki and Moretta and Machinsky and now Holderman, etc. But if you don't have the resources to go and spend at depth, you got to develop, you got to draft right, you got to hit on your trades, you got to have some international signings, etc., to put a competitive team on the field. And I think offensively, it's been a problem throughout the first half. Everybody's been calling for more offense. I think maybe the trigger was pulled late. You can sit there and maybe say, well, we didn't get enough offensive help early enough. And then when we did get the offensive help, and De La Cruz and IKF, they haven't really performed. They haven't hit enough, I guess. So you can look at it that way, and then it trickles down to, player development, coaching. We've gotten enough out of the talent that we have, and then it can trickle down to me what I think is maybe the ultimate level. You got players at the big league level that are performing up to their capabilities, and sometimes it's effort, sometimes it's lack of concentration, sometimes it's a lot of different things. But so I think there's at least 4 levels of where you can point your finger, starting at the top with MLB all the way down to the player who I don't think has performed well enough, or at least as good enough as you would think that they should.
Yeah, there's a lot of things. I mean, I know that the easiest place for at least fans and if somebody's writing an article or whatever it may be, I mean, the first 2 people you think of are Ben Cherington and Derek Shelton. And I mean, to kind of back this up to like when this show started, I started this show in 2009. In 2019 during that season, I could see that there was going to be a change, or there possibly needed to be a change at that point in time. Derek Shelton wasn't my first pick. I looked back at it right now, and I was a Stubby Clapp and a Mark Kotsay kind of guy. When Ben Cherington was there, he wasn't my first pick. I had Kim Ng and I had Matt Arnold. So I'm not trying to say that, I told you so, but then also, like you talk about the constraints that they're under. I mean, there's more reports out there that Ben Cherington was handcuffed at the deadline in the money that he could spend than the ones that are out there saying that there was more money to be spent. So I mean, it's very, very strange, and I don't know. I know the international thing has been brought up, and I mean, I go to Ben Cherington when he came in. I mean, a lot of people want to go back to Junior Vizcaíno when he was hired in 2017. But even if you go back that far, some of those players are still only 21 years old. I mean, you would hope that you would have, somebody have that breakout and have that potential and be able to see that potential closer. But in Ben Cherington's tenure, I mean, some of those guys, I mean, the oldest guys are, I don't know, 19, 20 years old. So, I mean, I think about, I think back, and I did tweet this out or X this out last night when I was kind of just a little bit frustrated, is that, some fans might not remember 2011 and 2012. And John, I know you remember those days well. Now, the Pirates were 54 and 49 in 2011, and then dropped down to a 90-loss team with a 10-game losing streak in there. It was even worse for us in 2012 because they had 70 wins at the beginning of September and only got 9 more wins the rest of the year. So I guess my question in this, I'm kind of ranting here a little bit, but I feel like most Pirates fans are at this point in time. But it's like, is it okay, one more year? And I know that's a horrible thing for Pirates fans to hear because they're always saying, oh yeah, wait till next year. But at this point in time, is it wait till next year?
Well, I think at this point, right now, today, I think it's wait till next year, unless they have some kind of historic turnaround where they can run off 10 straight or 15 and 20 or something like that to get back in the race. I mean, they only have than 3 teams in the National League right now. So to get back into the playoff picture, I mean, you're going to have to jump over a whole bunch of teams and hope that, they're not winning at a 500 level. And so, being realistic, I don't see how they make the postseason this year. But to touch on a couple of your points, and it's easy to go all over the place because there's, like you brought up, rightfully so, all the different fingers to point. And when you bring up the international market, I mean, the Pirates have invested a ton of money in international. And the international, it's not a draft, but just spending money on international players, they've done it, I think, since Frank Coonley's been in there. I think they've had a more concerted effort when Frank Coonley and Neil Huntington came in to spend more money. And they've spent a lot of money during Neil Huntington's days and now Ben Cherington's days. Luis Ortiz is the only starting pitcher I could think of that has come out of the international market that has done anything at the major league level. And when we talk about that, he has a dozen or so starts. So that's not very impactful. Position player-wise, I don't even know if Polanco and Marte were before Huntington or not, but other than Polanco nationally, that made an impact at the major league level. And Polanco, lesser impact than Marte, of course, but other than, a couple of guys there since Huntington, and we're talking now, 15 plus years, for the Pirates to compete at the major league level, they have to find guys in the international market as well as the draft. And when you have to move on from a player because he's up for free agency, you got to come up with better players and trades. You got to make the Brian Reynolds trade for Andrew McCutcheon, a great trade by Neil Huntington, and something that's obviously paid off. And there's been some others. The Tony Watson trade, obviously, for O'Neal Cruz is a good trade. But the international dollars have to be spent, and then that's a crapshoot too, to a degree, because you're only, you're signing guys to a lot of money that are 16 years old, so you never know which direction that's going to go. But other teams have been able to find all-star type players out of the international market. And the Pirates, again, consistently at the major league level, they have to find guys out of that area. The draft, obviously, there's been some good, there's been some not so good. Jury's still out on a lot of Ben Cherington's drafts. I mean, recently Skeens is a good one. We don't know about Henry Davis. We don't know. Bubba Channer looks good. We don't know yet. Solomito, we don't know yet. Lonnie White, we don't know yet. Termarr Johnson, we don't know yet. So the jury's still out on some of those guys. We don't have time to break down all the different trades, but you can't miss in those areas. You got to hit more than you miss when you sign money, especially the amount of money they spend on international players and on the draft. So, having said that, we move beyond that, and now you've got the major league talent, and you got the people that are here, and you looked like coming out of spring training, we had a good core. And we had a really good bullpen. The question mark was the rotation. Turns out the rotation is a strength. The offense was not a strength, and the bullpen faltered basically since, I guess, early July, end of June. I don't know exactly the time frame. So what do you do from there? Okay, so again, that's where we go to player performance. Our bullpen should have been better. Holderman, has a rough stretch. Bednar's had a rough stretch. Obviously, we've lost 3 valuable arms, and the guys I mentioned earlier, that's cost us games. At homestand against Arizona, San Diego was a disaster. And it wasn't just the bullpen, it was, the way they played. It looked bad for the bullpen because we gave up some leads late. But also, there were some crazy swings. Josh Bell hit a 103-mile-per-hour fastball out to tie a game. That's crazy. It's historic. It hasn't happened before. Off of Holderman on a 100-mile-an-hour fastball on the outside corner to the north side notch, essentially. We haven't seen that. The 2 walks before that are more costly than the 3-run homer, in my opinion. You don't walk 2 guys, Jock Peterson doesn't hit. So, like I said, you can point fingers at a lot of different areas. Obviously, there's been too much inconsistency from all facets, especially from the offense and lately the bullpen. More talent is going to result in more wins. All right. If you have lesser talent, and I guess this is where I went on a tangent the other day. If you have lesser talent, you have to play harder. You have to play smarter. You have to play better. If you don't have the talent, you don't have the $20 million players, the $15 million players, the $25 million plus players. You gotta play hard all the time. You gotta play smart all the time. You gotta play as mistake-free as possible. And I think in this last 2 weeks, that's where I have an issue. I don't think we've played hard enough. I don't think we've played smart enough. We haven't played mistake-free enough. And because of that, you have a 10-game losing streak and you've lost 13 or 14 instead of probably going 500, in my opinion.
It's definitely been rough to watch because it kind of seems like that every single time, even if the Pirates get back into a game, they're having to do that because they've already shot themselves in the foot. A lot of times, like you're talking about, especially with the errors, base running mistakes, getting a single instead of a double or a double instead of a triple, different things like that. That's, I think, where a lot of the frustration comes from. And I think that's where people are saying, I mean, if that falls squarely on, somebody's shoulders to not, let that happen, that would be Shelton. Obviously, the players are responsible themselves as well. But there has to be, I don't know, somebody in the clubhouse. It's something we've talked about before, John, is, and I don't want to go like all kinds like, tinfoil hat here and everything, but I mean, I look at Martin Perez, and I'm not even looking at Martin Perez, the player. I'm looking at Martin Perez, the player in the dugout, and what I saw from him. And him being the guy that, like, started the celebration ceremony of dumping that disgusting water with seeds and whatever it was, Gatorade, on people. Picking on O'Neal Cruz in a bat to, like, kind of get him to, loosen up a little bit. Different stuff like that. I know that when players go to other teams and then you play them again, I mean, there's some interactions between players and different stuff, but, the first time that they played against the Padres, which was very quickly after, the trade deadline, I mean, Martin Perez had 10, 15 guys around him. So I'm not saying that, Martin Perez stays and the Pirates do well, but it just kind of seems like that they're, and I don't want to use the word accountability because I think that's being used, I wouldn't say too much, but I would like to think of a better word. But it just kind of seems like that there's not that person or that leader in the clubhouse or, in the managerial ranks that can kind of like get this type of stuff under control.
Well, I think accountability is the perfect word, actually. I think the accountability, it starts from the very top and it goes all the way to the very bottom. I mean, I think everybody got to be accountable. As far as, the way you accumulate talent, to the way you develop talent, to the way that talent performs, and to the way you get the best out of that talent. There's a reason why you have president and a GM and a manager and coaches and all the way down. I mean, and I think they all have a responsibility to make the product better. You want the guy in there, okay? So we get the most talent as a GM and as a manager or a player development staff, you get these guys ready to play at the major league level. And then when they're at the major league level, okay, we get them to play the way the game's supposed to be played. You play it hard, you play it smart, you're prepared, you go about your business. To your point, as far as having a veteran presence, I think every manager in baseball wants a veteran presence in the clubhouse to hold the other players accountable. I mean, I think it's a lot easier hearing it from an established veteran, like, hey, why aren't we running that ball out? Hey, what were you thinking there? Why didn't we make that play? Why did you throw to the wrong base? Why weren't we trying to get the guy over? Et cetera. It's so much better. I think it's so much better for the younger player, especially, to hear that from a veteran presence that has some tenure and some experience and some clout, to hear from that player and have that player police and hold the other players accountable, I think is always a valuable resource. And, we have some veteran guys. Perez, like you said, was one. Chapman's another. I guess Tellez to a lesser extent, and McCutcheon. Brian Reynolds, I think, has grown into that but we're not talking about a lot of vocal guys. McCutcheon's not a very vocal guy, neither is Chapman or Reynolds. Perez maybe a little more so. And so, as far as all of that's concerned, yeah, I think there's value in having that veteran presence to make sure that things are being done the right way on the field. If it's not being done the right way on the field, that's where I think the coaching staff and the manager has to play a larger role. But I think at times with players, it gets stale hearing it from the same source all the time. Especially if they're disgruntled, or you never know what players feel about a coach or a manager, and sometimes, that message is better served coming from a veteran player. But the bottom line is, as far as being accountability, and I think it's in every clubhouse, and that's a mirror. And I think if you look into a mirror after a game and you sit there and see what could I, ask yourself, what could I have done better to win that game? I think that's the best way to be held accountable, is to hold yourself accountable and say, well, what could I have done better today to help us win this game? What did I do wrong today, and how am I going to not let that happen again to where we lose tomorrow making the same mistakes? And I think, I think today, in today's game, I think that's probably harder to come by than any other day. For whatever reason, I just think I see the same thing. I see at times the guys aren't playing hard, and you think they would learn by hitting a line drive off the wall and it's being a single instead of a double. You'd think the next time they would run harder. You know what I mean? There's times where I'm seeing the same mistakes, and I'm seeing the same, I don't want to call it nonchalantness, but I see things on the field, not just with the Pirates, but with every team. I see things to where I'm like, man, why does this keep happening? How do we keep allowing this to happen? How do you just, make the same mistakes over and over again? How can it be you have 4 at-bats in a game and you can't run hard all 4 at-bats, especially when you have a chance to get extra bases or you have a chance to score a run, etc. That's the thing that drives me crazy. And I think, like I said, somehow, some way, I think players, to be good players, a lot of these guys are young and they're playing for next year, or they're playing for a contract or whatever. You would think that they would sit there and be able to self-evaluate every now and again to figure out, hey, I want to win. Not only do I want to get another contract, I want to win. And so, if you can't hold yourself accountable, somebody got to hold players accountable to make sure that they're playing like major league players and doing everything they can to win ball games.
I mean, there's a lot of things to look at, and the other frustrating part is John, I look at Pirate stats all the time, and it's probably an obsession at this point in time. And with Mitch Keller's 2 rough starts to start August here, I looked back to see if there was a little bit of a pattern with him, and it kind of looks that last year it was the end of July and into August was he just went through a rough stretch and was good the rest of the year. So even when Mitch Keller is, Mitch Keller, there is a period of time where he kind of loses that. And I don't know why. And it always seems to be the end of July into August. And this year it's August again. Not even joking. His walks and hits per innings pitched for his career in August, the career splits is a 1.6, where the rest of the season it's around, from a 1.1 to a 1.2. And I don't know what happens with Mitch there. And not that we can, I'm not blaming Mitch. It was just something that I had to get kind of out of my brain here, is that, I mean, even the guys that, you can really count on in a Mitch Keller, I mean, they're even struggling at this point in time, but it's almost like you could have, set your clock by this for Mitch. So it's just something out there. And I don't know if you noticed anything with Mitch recently that he's doing any differently.
Not really. I want to say, I can't remember what his last start at home. I don't remember if we won that game or not. I'm trying to remember. I just know before that game that he pitched it at a homestand, and I don't even remember if it was against San Diego or Arizona. but I looked at, we were, I think, 12-2 in his previous 14 starts. And you thought about, well, the reason we don't lose 3 games in a row, a big part of it's Mitch Keller. I mean, he goes out there and, he goes out there and gives you a chance to win, good chance to win. And so when he does throw out a couple clunkers like he did in L.A. and yesterday in San Diego, that's certainly the exception, not the norm. I don't remember much about the Dodgers start, but yesterday, I mean, after the first hit by Arias, I see like a one-hopper to Connor Joe, and it's a nice stop, but it's an out. It should be an out. There should be a guy on first, 1 out, or a guy on second, 1 out. And, now all of a sudden it's 2 on, nobody out, and the next pitch, the 3-run homer was a poorly executed pitch. It's a slider that's down and in for a strike to a left-handed hitter, which is like the danger zone. And I remember this vividly because I don't remember how many times Mitch Keller has made that mistake, to where he's left a breaking ball inner third, just above the knee to a left-handed hitter. I mean, to me, that's like basically the one pitch you don't want to make a mistake with. And I've always thought Mitch Keller was pretty good at not leaving a ball breaking into that left-handed bat like that, especially a power hitter, to where he can give up a 3-run homer. The velocity was down a little bit. Peralta hit a fastball that was up and in, which I didn't think was a bad pitch, but if he's throwing 94, 95, 96, it's probably not a home run, but his velocity wasn't there. Here's the one thing I want to remind everybody of. The season is long, and especially August, I always felt were the toughest months because it's hot, it's humid. You're back to the grind after the All-Star break. It's mentally draining, and you're not always going to feel 100%. A lot of times in August, it's just like getting out there and getting prepared for a game. It's hard to have that same kind of adrenaline. And I think that happens to everybody, no matter how good you are. I think there's times where you just don't feel good. You just don't feel like you don't have the same drive, the same adrenaline that you might have, 90% of the time. And you have a bad day because of it. And I'm not saying they're making excuses for Mitch Keller. I don't know exactly what's going on. Again, he didn't execute some pitches. And for whatever reason, I also think he could have had a play made behind him. And it's one of those things where I think every pitcher, every player in baseball is going to have these times where for a week or two it just doesn't feel right. And you just don't feel strong. You don't feel like you have the same stuff that you can execute the way you're capable of, and you're just grinding through it. And maybe that's what it is with Mitch Keller. He's just he just doesn't feel like he's at the top of his game, and then you try to be too perfect because you don't feel like you get away with mistakes. A lot of times you end up making mistakes because you're trying to be too perfect.
And that's, I mean, Mitch is a guy that, I mean, we all know he's a hard worker. We all know he's a very good pitcher. I mean, he has performed well, like you've said, more often than not over these past, at least, this season, last season, and half of the season before. It was just kind of something that stuck out to me. And we're talking about, players not performing, as well as, we kind of as fans has hoped. And it kind of seems like, Ben Cherington as the general manager hoped, and Derek Shelton as the manager hoped, and with Jack Sawinski, the struggles he had this year, I thought that maybe Jack wouldn't become that all-star type player, but I didn't see this huge regression. Everybody knows my stance on Brian Hayes, that I thought that there was a fine line in the middle where he wasn't going to be what he was for the second half of last year, but he would never be for a full season as bad as he was, for the first half of last year. But you see an absolute regression from him. It was something crazy or ridiculous that he only has maybe 1 or 2 extra base hits over the past 3 months, which, I mean, for a guy that you're counting on as part of the core, I mean, that's something that, just can't happen. I mean, the regression we've seen from Connor Joe in the second half of this year. I mean, it's just pretty much, been all around except for, Brian Reynolds coming on in June like he always does. And then it's continued from there. And, obviously, Andrew McCutchen, I will look at his overall OPS and, would obviously want more from a DH spot. I think his, OPS hangs around like 725 to 745, which is above league average, is hitting for some power. But he also, goes into stretches where he's not hitting. But yeah, I just think that there's just too many holes at too many times, if that makes sense, John, where it's just like, really can't really put things together. It's just, like I said at the beginning of this episode, it's frustrating. And like I told you before, it's just like a punch in the gut.
Yeah, and you're bringing up more good points because many times this year you look at the lineup and you see four guys in the lineup with an OPS under 600, and then you just scratch your head like wonder how is this possible. And I would say that there's a lot of teams out there that I see they have 2 or 3 or 4 guys. It's really down throughout baseball with a lot of different teams. The Diamondbacks or the Padres or the Dodgers is because they have more depth in their lineup. Although they have holes in it too. You see there's holes in the Dodgers lineup. There's guys at the bottom of that lineup that you can pitch to. And so it's not like they're stacked. And I think there are a lot of teams with with lineups that just you wonder how are guys playing every day with an OPS of 6 or below. It's almost amazing. It's like, but there's a lot of teams like that. And so the two guys you brought up, and I'll echo it. Brian Hayes has been a huge disappointment. He has like a dozen extra base hits on the year. And that's just not acceptable from that position. And the adjustments just haven't been made. And I'm sorry. You can sit there and point your finger at hitting coaches, and I guess you should blame them to a degree because it's their job to get these guys to perform at the major league level. But again, ultimately, it's the player that has to make these adjustments and do better, especially guys that are signed to long-term deals. There should be no rock overturned to figure out how to get things right, to find what you're looking for, so you're not hitting, at a 600 OPS clip and with a dozen extra base hits into the middle of August. So that's definitely a gaping hole. That's a position you want production from, and it hasn't been there. He's still in the 25 RBI range. That's unacceptable. You just got to get more production from that position. Jack Sawinski is maybe the biggest head scratcher for me. And so when you go into a season and you expect 25 to 30 homers from your right fielder and Sawinski, and you expect 10 to 20 homers and much more production from your third baseman, and you don't get it, and so you have endless. So many different players in right field trying to replace that production that Jack has given you, at times, and you don't find it. Whether it be Palacios or Olivares, and now De La Cruz, G1 Bay and Connor Joe, it's we could never that's another power position. You expect home runs and RBIs, and we haven't gotten it in right field. And Connor Joe, I'll defend him to a degree because I've never looked at him as an everyday guy. And for 2 months, he hit like an everyday guy, so they let him out there. But he's more of a guy that you insert him against lefties, and you can get him 300, 400 bats. I don't think he was a 600 bat guy. And and he did a good job for a couple months, but he has fallen off. But I didn't expect that from him. I expected more from Jack Sawinski and of course, Brian Hayes. And it's the big leagues, and we talk about it all the time. It's hard, and so Jack Sawinski is back in the minor leagues because he's got to try to figure it out, and hopefully he can figure it out and become a productive big league player. Brian Hayes is a different situation because he's locked up long term. He helps you on defense, but you need to get more on offense, and so that's a couple gaping holes. Henry Davis is another. You expected a lot, but fortunately Joey Bart was a great find by Ben Cherington, and he's done a wonderful job He's in the 30. He don't have 200 bats yet. He has 30 some odd RBIs and 10 homers. So at least we don't have a gaping hole behind the plate, which we had most of the year last year with Austin Hedges. But there's certainly there's some areas where they have to improve on offense to complement that starting pitching staff, which I think is going to be good. Not only the rest of this year, but for many years to come, it looks like.
So, John, I guess I just have one last question for you here, and I'll definitely let you go. But my question would be we talked about accountability. We've talked about, where the holes exist, what, the players can do. And you have to be almost like mistake-free if you're not going to have, the most talented lineup at times. So I guess, my question would be is do we just reiterate that and we hold that patience and we wait for that kind of stuff? Or is there like a bigger thing that can be done within the organization to jumpstart that or change that?
Well, there's, to me, again, I think you got to have a fundamentally sound baseball club, because you're not going to have, a whole bunch of power guys that could kind of cover up mistakes to where you could just hit home runs and it doesn't matter if you run the bases well or play good defense. I think about the first Red Sox team that won the World Series in 2004 or whatever, and I thought that was a terrible base running team, a terrible defensive team, but they had good pitching and they had guys that could hit the ball. Okay, so you can have a team that can cover up a lot of mistakes. Again, this Pirates squad, they're never going to have a big payroll, and so they got to outplay other teams. They got to outsmart other teams. And so I think it has to be, a part of the culture is that we're going to do the little things better than everybody else to win more ball games. And a lot of that is defense. The defense, you got to make the routine play. You can't give away bases. Errors are going to happen. Errors are going to happen to everybody. But you can't have the careless errors, the mental lapse errors. You gotta, and you just gotta have a solid defensive squad. And then offensively, fundamental baseball is out the window. And how do you get that back? I'm not sure. Again, it almost has to be a culture piece to where you're going to know how to bunt when you get to the big league levels. You're going to know how to hit the ball on the ground for a hit and run at the big league level. You're going to have to learn how to hit the ball on the right side with the runner on second base at the big league level. I got to put the ball in play with a runner on third, less than 2 outs. I think that almost has to be a culture piece that is taught from the very beginning. From the moment you sign your big league contract, the moment you come into the organization, is that we got to be able to win close games, and to do that, we got to play fundamentally sound baseball. Every team in baseball, I think, is so poor at doing the little things it takes to win games. We see it. Guys can't get butts down. Guys can't get guys over. Guys swing and miss. The strikeouts are climbing throughout the game, and I think it's got to be you got to put an emphasis on it. If you're not going to hit 30 home runs, I need you to put the ball in play. I need you to be able to manufacture runs. In this losing streak, and the one win since the trade deadline, a lot has been written and a lot has been talked about how many one-run games you lose. Well, we're losing a lot of one-run games, and if you're playing fundamentally sound baseball and you're not making the mental mistakes on defense, you catch the ball, you don't give extra outs, and you do the little things on offense by taking the extra base. Not failing to get the extra base, but by taking the extra base and by moving guys and doing the little things it takes to push runs across, you're not losing one-run games. You're winning one-run games. And to me, if you don't have the payroll, you got to have the grit, the determination, and the wherewithal to find a way to minimize run scoring and to maximize pushing runs across home plate.
Can't disagree with any of that, John, and hopefully the Pirates, are able to do that so that the next time we talk, we're not in the midst of, the longest losing streak of the season, and we're not as frustrated as, fans and, broadcasters and media and everybody, because, we're all sticking around for baseball. We all love the game. But John, as always, it's great to have you come on here and talk, and I really do appreciate it, sir.
Yeah, always a pleasure, and I will say this about frustration. Frustration is a good thing because the expectations were higher. If there wasn't any frustration, there wouldn't be any expectations. So, I mean, especially this year, when you saw the pitching talent and you saw the need for an upgrade on offense, and you saw where they were just at the All-Star break and after, that you had a chance. Okay, so there's enough talent there to be frustrated with when you don't win more games. And so I never mind frustration because that means there's some expectation. So that's much better, because in the White Sox, in Chicagoland with the White Sox, nobody's frustrated. They're just disgusted.
Yeah, it's definitely a different feeling.
Yeah.